Good evening, everybody. This is the Radulich Broadcasting Network premiere podcast, Long Road to Ruin. Yes, we dusted it off again. I'm your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. Over Christmas time in Hollis, Queens, we brought you the Santa Claus trilogy, and you know what? It was so nice, we're doing it twice. The Bad Boys are back in town. Bad Boys for Life is what they're calling it. And God help us, there's going to be a fourth one of these. Just stop already. All right, I'm going to get sidetracked. You can hear me lamenting this franchise over on Damn You Hollywood, where we reviewed Bad Boys for Life. But in the meantime, there were two previous movies to this, as I said, directed by the inimitable Michael Bay. And boy, were these movies made in the 90s with explosions. So we're going to talk about them tonight. Bad Boys 1995 and then Bad Boys 2 from 2003. 8 years later, the saga continued. Joining me on this ride through franchises high and low, my good buddy, Sean Comer. How do you do, sir?
Mark, I'm sorry. I think we may have finally reached the point where so many video games have at last rotted my brain. There's no way I actually heard you say there's going to be a fourth one of these.
Yes. I take it you have not seen Bad Boys for Life?
I haven't. There shouldn't have been a second.
So you know how somewhere in the middle of the Fast and the Furious, they started doing the thing where, hey, we know you killed a lot of people and destroyed zillions of dollars in property, and you're currently sitting in prison? Yeah? Well, there's this mission we need completed by a guy with your set of skills. Yeah. There's going to be a fourth one of these, because that's how they ended Bad Boys 3.
Yeah, I said at the end of Bad Boys 2, and there's no way Marcus Burnett or Mike Lowry ever saw the outside of a jail cell again. The end.
After causing an international incident in Cuba, I would agree with you.
No fucking way they don't become prison bitches for life. Bad Boys 3 should be 90 minutes. Yes, 90 minutes, not 2 fucking goddamn hours. And especially not nearly 250, not fucking almost 150 minutes of Mike and Marcus being traded for cigarettes.
Yeah, Bad Boys 3, if they insisted on making a third one of these, should have taken place in Oz. And I don't mean the wonderful land of.
There's no way! There is no way after that rampage across Cuba, after deciding of all the possible ways they could have rescued Marcus Burnett's sister, to decide on Bay of Pigs 2 Electric Boogaloo.
I have to say, and we'll talk about this again, but since you brought it up, that has to be my favorite car chase in the history of film. The second one is probably the Blues Brothers, just because that music, there's nothing quite like.
I was gonna say, son, say something other than Blues Brothers, motherfucker. I dare you. I double dog fucking dare you.
It's a top 3. The second Matrix movie with the ghosts going in and out of the car, in no particular order. The Blues Brothers, the original, and Bad Boys 2. Because I'm sorry, there's something gleefully wonderful about a car, a Humvee driving top speed down a mountainside through all manner of shack and cookhouse, and some poor schmo's home.
See, and now I'm also slightly disappointed that you discounted the original Gone in 60 Seconds.
Meh.
Though that one has a banger of a car chase in it too.
Yeah, but they're not causing wholesale destruction and ruining people's lives in the process. That I can recall. It's been a while since I've seen Gone in 60 Seconds.
I would argue it certainly did. just not on the gargantuan splody bukkake level.
Right. Well, we all know that I like...
that Michael Bay did.
Well, we all know I like a good explosion bukkake, so...
Is there any other kind? Is there any other kind except explosive bukkake? It would just be disappointing.
Yes, but we're not going to talk about it on this podcast. Jesus Christ. All right. So we're going to look at the notes and the plot line of the plot summary of the original Bad Boys from 1995, and then we'll talk about it for a little bit, the highs and the lows of this turkey, and then we'll reset and do it all over again for Bad Boys 2. So, Sean, what do you got for notes on this first turkey?
Once upon a time in the magical land of Hollywood, Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer decided they were going to make a Dana Carvey and John Lovitz vehicle.
Yeah, I just heard about that today.
I am not shitting you. This was who they originally envisioned back when it was going to be called not Bad Boys, but Bulletproof Hearts, which, fuck me, is the most anime-sounding name for a buddy cop movie I ever heard in the last 2 days.
Yeah, when the focus was on the mistaken identity thing and you needed kind of comedians to pull off what they were going for, that totally tracks. And it's certainly a big part of this first one, which I completely forgot about, because all I remember about Bad Boys, and really all that's important about Bad Boys, is ass and titties and explosions.
Uh-huh.
And the fact that, and Screen Junkies actually pointed this out, which I thought was funny in the Honest trailer, that essentially the Bad Boys movies, are, and the whole act of being a police officer is cover for Will Smith's Mike Lowry being a serial killer. Just thought it was damn funny.
Oh, and we almost didn't get Will Smith as Mike Lowry.
Go on.
Arsenio Hall turned the role down and later cited it as the worst mistake he'd ever made.
Yeah, that's about right.
Fucking Arsenio instead of Will Smith. I would watch the shit out of that movie, especially if you found a way to dump Martin Lawrence and bring on Eddie Murphy back when he was still relatively funny.
Yeah, here's the thing. I don't see. I mean, other than maybe like Denzel Washington, or somebody known for being a high charisma black action star. I don't see a lot of people outside of Will Smith getting that role as pitch perfect as he does. However, you could have done it one of two ways. You could have gotten rid of Martin Lawrence and put Arsenio Hall in the Martin Lawrence part, and I think it still works with Will Smith and Arsenio Hall. The other way to do it is throw them both out and replace Will Smith with Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence with Arsenio Hall, and then just keep doing that.
Now, the thing you have to remember is, again, this was Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer at the height of their combined powers. They were never a more prolific combined license to print money than during the period when they made this, and I think didn't they also both work on The Rock?
I believe so.
Yeah. Like this, The Rock, a host of other cartoonishly bombastic 90s action movies.
Really the height of cinema in the last
Right, exactly. So if you're talking about a Simpson Bruckheimer production, yeah, ultimately it makes more sense, and Martin and Will probably fit like more of a glove than Dana and John would have. Sure. Now, on the other hand, if we're talking about some wacky-tacky multiverse timeline in which Bad Boys is made by the people who brought you Trading Places, Dana Carvey, John Lovitz, I'll buy a ticket to that. Yeah, absolutely. But the nifty thing about this is all of that charisma and all that chemistry between Smith and Lawrence, it stems from improv. Michael Bay didn't like the script. He went to both of them and sought their input on how they would spice up the scenes and the dialogue. He encouraged them to go off the cuff and off script. At one point, before the car scene, he pulled Will aside and told him to call Martin a bitch. the whole two bitches in the sea bit, completely off the top of their heads. Same with Martin's comment when Tia Leone called him gay. The glorious scene in the convenience store. on the spot. That was where they came up with, no, you freeze, bitch. Now back up, put the gun down, get me a pack of tropical fruit Bubblicious. And some Skittles.
Yeah.
Sure. There was line that Smith refused to say. He refused to say the I love you, man.
Mm-hmm.
And then, he and Bay kind of butted heads back and forth over it. Bay felt like it summed up the two men's friendship. They spent half a day arguing over this, and right when the crew was about to pack it up, Bay told Smith to just, do whatever the fuck you want. At which point Will changed his mind and said the damn line. But goddamn, you can't fucking argue with the results. You just can't, because we're talking about, by the numbers, $19 million budget. I know it's mind-blowing and almost even a little bit scary to think of Michael Bay making a movie with only $19 million. $141.4 million at the box office. It only got about, according to Rotten Tomatoes, it's batting about 42% out of 62 sampled critic reviews. Averages 5 out of 10 somehow. A lot of the criticism tends to center on the script just being too generic for the likings of some apparently. But hey, cliches are cliches for a reason. They're cliches because they can work. It's Roger Ebert kind of referred to both Smith and Lawrence as new wine in old bottles.
It almost works as a send-up of the buddy cop genre, doesn't it? Like,
it does.
It's not a total parody, but it definitely takes the framework of the buddy cop genre and I don't know if it knows it's making fun of it, but it totally is. Like Joe Pantoliano, and I don't want to get too far ahead here, but Joe Pantoliano as the beleaguered, shouting, angry captain. It's like I remember watching it a few days ago, and I'm thinking to myself, like, does he know he's doing a parody of that character?
He's a smart guy. He has to. He has to know exactly what he's doing there. And yet this movie is so much fucking fun. Like it is at least thrice as much fun as I expected it to be.
Anything else with the notes?
No, I'm good for notes. I'm ready to.
Okay.
I'm ready for you to move on to the very familiar sounding plot.
Yes, it's basically, here's the deal: we have two cops that are as destructive as atomic bombs, and they had a career bust in heroin, which is then summarily ripped off, which now makes it look like there's an inside job going on, and so their particular precinct of the Miami Police Department is now under investigation by Internal Affairs. In order to absolve the station of guilt, they need to get the heroin back and solve the case of, this particular robbery. Along the way, the people who stole the heroin throw a party to which Tia Leone is like a +1 to this call girl who's invited to this party, and all hell breaks loose. People are murdered, including this girl, and Tia Leone is a witness to this. So Now she then tries to go into hiding. She knows of one particular cop, the only one that she can trust, because, I think she's somehow discovers that there might be police, or there definitely are police that are in on this crime. So she only trusts one particular cop, and it's the one that her friend knew, Mike Lowry, played by... Sorry, let me do it the way Martin Lawrence does it throughout this entire script at least 800 times.
Go for it, George.
Mike Lowry.
Lowry.
Lowry. I toyed around with doing a bit tonight when I introduced you. I was like, Sean, oh my,
I don't think honestly that you're so much doing Martin Lawrence as Paul Heyman with a mother of all post-nasal drips.
No, I'm doing gold dust is what I'm doing, including the hand motions in an audio format. Anyway, so she's like, she calls the police. She's like, I'll only talk to Mike Lowry, and Mike Lowry is elsewhere doing other things, and so the only cop available is Martin Lawrence, who now then has to play the part of Mike Lowry. And here's what you need to know about these two characters. You have Will Smith, who is second generation trust fund wealthy, and he became a cop, and he is forever trying to prove his worth to the point that it has driven to be somewhat of a violent person, trying to play down this perception of him that he only went into the cop business for the chills and thrills. You have Martin Lawrence, who's got a bunch of kids and a house, a mortgage, a wife, and he's just trying to do police stuff. And, wacky-tacky, as you put it before, Will Smith is always getting him into trouble. And so they have this lifelong friendship and partnership. Again, you have the suave, and then you have the family man. And now, this family man, this totally not suave guy, has to figure out how to be Don Juan in order to convince this woman who doesn't know who Mike Lowry is, just knows the name, and has some inkling of what he might be, that he is in fact Mike Lowry. Which is, as Sean was saying before, was the original premise of this whole movie. It was a case of mistaken identity. So there's a big bulk of the middle of the movie, once we're done blowing things up and shooting at people and causing murder and mayhem throughout the streets of Miami, is a lot of Tia Leone and Martin Lawrence, and then to a lesser degree Will Smith, trying to act, she's trying to figure out what's going on, and Martin Lawrence is trying to act like Will Smith, and Will Smith is trying to act like Martin Lawrence. And so there's also extended bits of Will Smith at home with Martin's wife, and of course he's utterly insecure, and so he thinks his best friend of X amount of years is banging his wife. This all leads to a giant conference, and in the middle of all this, they are trying to get this woman to identify who's in this gang, so they can figure out who stole the heroin and go bust them. There's a lot of hilarity that ensues. There's false starts and whatnot. They kind of oscillate between funny stuff with Tia Leone, Martin Lawrence, and then Will Smith and Teresa Randall, who plays Martin Lawrence's wife. And the occasional Joe Pantoliano having a stroke. So there's a lot of that. And then finally this gets to a point where Tia Leone is captured by the crooks, and they have to go get her. There's a big shootout at the end, and a big chase. And if I remember correctly, I'll just read this. Burnett Lowry and the two other Miami detectives head to Miami Opelika Executive Airport. After a fierce shootout, they kill the remainder of Fouché's henchmen, including Casper and Ferguson, and rescue Julie, who's Tia Leone. They chase a fleeing Fouché and force his car into a concrete barrier. Oh, that's right. I remember this now. And Fouché tries to flee. Lowry shoots Fouché in the leg and arrests him at gunpoint. And here's the true drama of this part, okay? That this law enforcement officer has to stop himself from murdering somebody in cold blood. Which he does, proving, despite the millions and trillions of dollars in destruction he's caused, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. Bad boys, what you gonna do? Sean, this movie is so much fun. I mean, look, here's the thing. You can totally tell a lot of it was improv. There are scenes. First of all, Michael Bay as a director, it's one of the things I really like about him. You may not like his vision, but he at least has one.
Yeah.
He has a very, very sharp, crisp, clear picture of what he wants to show the audience. And he does a lot of really great camera work and visuals for what would otherwise be kind of standard action fare. With that said, he's another one who's very technical, who's very into visuals. And, being a director, I think you have to be somewhat of a visual artist. Maybe very much a visual artist, depending on how you read directors. What he's not good... He also, unfortunately, went to the George Lucas School of Dealing with People. And he just... There's one thing that's consistent, is he really doesn't know how to elicit good performance. He has been blessed to have worked with an array of great actors, clearly great improvisational actors who can kind of take a Midland dialogue and plot and elevate it to where it's very entertaining. I don't know how well this movie works if it doesn't have Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. Martin Lawrence at the height of his powers, by the way. This is at the time where I think he's got some stand-ups in theaters, and he's got the show on. Martin.
Yep.
And at the time, Martin was like the it comedian around town. And Will Smith, this is where his career's taken off, and he's got a bunch of pictures that are doing millions of dollars at the box office. But as successful as they are, they're also incredibly talented and have like Romeo and Juliet charisma together. They are magic on screen. So you're watching this, and Michael Bay doesn't have to do a lot of performance direction. He basically just has to say, camera's here, shit blows up there, talk. You can mark this off on your bingo cards, and I'll let Sean jump in after this. Essentially, Michael Bay is what Vince McMahon used to do with wrestlers in the 80s and 90s. Here's your bullet points. Go.
Yep. Oh yeah, you nailed it. When Michael Bay movies are good, like in my opinion, you compare this to, let's compare it to The Rock. You're talking about, because Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery don't need Michael Bay's help.
No.
To make material interesting. They just don't. And then let's throw in someone on the side for a little bit of good comedy relief every now and then, like young Dave Chappelle
and Steve Buscemi.
Steve Buscemi, another one who just tell him just roughly what you want to do. It's like a story that I once heard about production on Scrubs. That everybody else had these proper scripts that were mostly written for them, and then Neil Flynn as the janitor. I once heard somebody, I think it might have been Bill Lawrence, claim that the script was just a page with a Post-it on it that just said whatever Neil wants to do, because he was just that damn good off the cuff. But, Bay is a superb action movie cinematographer. You just never want to see him behind the director's chair ever again. And the thing that I like about Martin and Will is the fact that they're both charismatic in such different ways that it makes sense that you would put them in the roles where they are. Because Martin had this combustible, acerbic kind of energy about him, whereas Will, at this point, was, for the most part, decidedly, let's just say, cleaner. But he was witty. He was charming. He had a self-assured swagger about him. So here he might as well have just been playing an R-rated Fresh Prince.
Yeah. It plays like Martin Lawrence, the stand-up comedian, and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Right, pretty much the ultimate crossover between shows on different networks, between the Fresh Prince and Martin.
Yeah, and so it absolutely plays like that, and they're given enough creative freedom and the ability to trust each other and work with each other that they're given a rather pedestrian script. I mean, and that's the thing. I think if you deconstruct Bad Boys, it's a very pedestrian script that, like I said, almost mocks the genre. But so its bones are kind of made are like bird bones. They're kind of hollow, but it's dressed with great performances and exciting visuals. And credit where it's due, Téa Leoni, who is hot stuff in this picture.
Whoo!
I had forgotten what a dainty little thing she was.
Oh yeah.
But she, I think if anyone's giving a true, for what she's given to do, if anyone is given like good, like, non over the top silly performance, it's Téa Leoni, who is basically given the direction of you're scared shitless and you only trust one person on Earth. Go. And I think this was like her first major role.
Well, but she's also streetwise enough that she's not taking any shit from either of them either.
Yeah, I think once she starts to suss out what's going on and the jig is up, she's like, all right, I've had enough of your horse pucky and chicanery. And she kind of turns. But my point with her was more, she gives a very good dramatic performance. This is what I mean by Michael Bay is really blessed to have the cast that he does. Mm-hmm. Because when they're not blowing things up or giving you other exciting, Robert Winfrey talked about this when we did Damn You Hollywood, the as he put it, the unnecessary club visuals, to which I retorted, no, those are very necessary. Sorry you don't like shaking asses on screen, but I was having a good time. And there's certainly a lot of that. Again,
it was a nice breather.
Sure. Everything can't be on fire all the time. So, the point being that the cast elevates the screenplay, and whether it's dramatic performance or improv, there's never really a time on screen where you as the viewer, I think, unless you're just not into this sort of thing, like you're kind of forced there against your will. I think if you went into it going, I like big dumb action movies, I think there's a lot of meat on the bone to enjoy. And where I was going with this is I don't think Bad Boys has any wasted motion. I think between the interpersonal stuff between Martin Lawrence and Will Smith, the dramatic performances, and then the action and some of the overtop visuals, it's all going someplace.
It's 2 hours that very rarely drags, unless you're watching it and you're in some situation where you're acutely aware of the time and you've got someplace you've got to be. It's altogether possible you could sit back and just think that it's another average 90-minute contemporary action movie.
There are parts with Martin Lawrence and Téa Leoni where it becomes a little too cringy, a little too Three's Company-ish. But and here's the thing. In other movies, without an adult in the room and someone to edit Michael Bay, he's like foreign guy from Family Guy, where he just doesn't know when the joke is over, and it's gone way too far. Like there are certain bits where clearly there was somebody on set to say, "Fuck, yell cut, Michael, cut." And it saves it, like it just hits that line to where if it had gone maybe a minute longer, you'd have been completely over into cringe territory and it would have taken you out of the movie. there's some stuff with Martin Lawrence that's like that. There are definitely times where also they just turn the camera on and let Martin Lawrence riff, and again somebody's screaming through Michael Bay's headset, "For the love of God, yell cut! Stop him!" This is, and they do, and a lot of it I'm sure was saved in editing. And so you have a nice, clean movie here. And I bring that up because I don't know where those people were on Bad Boys 2, but they were all shot and killed and buried under a church somewhere. Because boy, does no one know when to yell cut on that movie. But we'll get there in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Anything else on this one?
Not really a whole lot. I mean, as is the case when we actually like a movie. It's just... It's what was it Ebert called it? Old wine in new bottles?
Sure.
No, this is lightning captured in old bottles. I mean, you're taking tropes and motifs and predictability that feels so stale when if you would have cast your standard 90s action stars in those roles, even right down to Martin kind of busting out a Wesley Snipes Passenger 57 joke. But when you hand it to two people who feel relatively fresh together, two people that you haven't seen in a setting like this, and then your visual virtuoso director just, for the most part, takes the hands off. He doesn't like the script anyway, so he just asks them, "What would you do?" And then you just let them do thing come out good.
It is an exercise in the joy and successfulness of artful collaboration.
It really is. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you got what I was saying. Yeah, I feel like all I do lately is just bash Star Wars, but unlike the prequel trilogy where it was like one guy's vision and no one saying no and no editors, trying to shape this thing. I love. So first of all, I love the idea of here's this kind of half garbage screenplay. Let's use it as a vehicle for something else. It's got some pretty good bones to it. Maybe let's dress it up and see where it might take us. And then you invite some other people to kind of come in and play. And everyone's playing, and everyone's doing something, and everyone's lending their expertise. And suddenly you've got this really interesting, elevated thing. And look, I'm not saying it's gone with the wind. I'm saying clearly this hit a note with the public, or it wouldn't have done nearly as well as it did. Because $141 million in 1995 is pretty goddamn good, especially on a $20 million budget.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So, when you think about the amount of big budget action movies that are that are out there, and how many of them they're okay, but they don't strike nearly the chord that this one did. I mean, this one, in terms of cultural relevance, people were doing the Bad Boys thing because of the show Cops. And the song itself was a pretty big hit. But I think it kind of blossomed within the cultural lexicon because of the Cop show, because it was that theme. But when you think about, the next level of that, when you think of Bad Boys, one, you think of Cops, two, you think of this franchise. You think of this movie. This resonated with people.
It really did. Do you think you can put your finger on why?
I think it has a lot of charm appeal. I think when you and I go back to when you allow people who are very sharp of wit and very quick, and just allow them to do their thing, and then shape the area around them to keep it all very interesting and visually exciting. I don't, the mass audience isn't really looking for a lot. They want to be entertained,
No.
They want to laugh, they want to see stuff that's interesting, and they don't want to be bored. And this checked all those boxes. I also think the violence in this is so over the top cartoonish. that it never really comes across as like this isn't Death Wish, you know. This isn't. It's so silly that people have a good.
Sorry, okay? I had to fix my headset for a moment. If I have it sitting too far back on my head, it pulls my hair in a funny way, and the headset starts to slip off.
Got it. I just think, like I said, there's kind of a Looney Tunes sense of violence here that, you know, like I remember taking my daughter to go see The Matrix, and, you know, that's a lot of shooting people in the face. To the point where I was like, oh, I forgot how violent this was. Whereas Bad Boys is, like I said, Looney Tunes. It's you know, Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner. It's just everything is blowing up, and yeah, there's a degree of gunplay. Sure, there is, but it's so over the top silly that it almost doesn't come across as like super violent. You know what I mean?
Oh, definitely. It's when it comes to movie violence, you kind of want to aim for one of two things. You want to either make it so realistic and unflinchingly brutal that nobody would think to ever imitate it, because it just kind of makes them terrified of the repercussions, or you want to make it so absurdly cartoony, that it would be almost unthinkable that anyone would mistake that for the way any feasible real life scenario would actually play out.
At the end of I don't know if you've seen Joker yet, or if it's okay for me to spoil the ending, but at the end of Joker, Joaquin Phoenix just kind of he delivers his line. He was like, "What do you take? I mean, you know, when you cross a mentally ill person with a society that's falling apart, or whatever the line is?" He goes, "You get what you deserve," and he just shoots Robert De Niro in the head. It's one shot at close range, and it's jarring, and it's scary, and it's violent, and it's horrifying. On the other side of that, there was 1917, where there's like close range explosions, and and like you see in the commercial, there's a character running across a field, and the world is blowing up behind them, and it all feels very, very real and scary and violent and horrifying. This is like the polar opposite of both of those things, where it's so silly and so over the top you can't possibly take it seriously, and it's just good, entertaining fun. So, if we've got nothing else, let's move on to Bad Boys 2, which is 8 years later. There a story here? Is there a reason why this took so goddamn long?
I didn't really have just a whole lot in the way of notes, because I wanted to focus mostly on just how the franchise itself was really born. There's not a whole lot. There's not a whole lot to it. One of the biggest obstacles was that Michael Bay and Will Smith especially had blown up so hugely in the interim between 1995 and 2003 that they were pulling some of the most money of anyone in the movie industry. Or wait, do I have the right movie here? Yeah, I do. Just want to make absolutely sure I had the right notes. They were just absolutely riding high. And wait, no, you know what? I do have the wrong ones. Those were notes for Bad Boys for Life that I kind of took just in case the subject might have come up. No, I mean, production-wise, not a whole lot. I mean, the most I can really tell you is that it somehow has an even lower rating on Rotten Tomatoes. What am I saying somehow for? You tacked 30 extra minutes onto the fucking running time and somehow sapped out about 60% of the charm. It's got a 23% approval rating based on 179 reviews, weighted average of 4.1 out out of 10.
Boy, do people hate this movie.
Yeah, the summation is 2.5 hours of explosions and witless banter.
So Martin Lawrence is quite the enigma. I want to share something with you.
Yeah, fire away.
Because the question posed was, hey, what, 8 years? Wow, that took a while. So you would think like maybe somebody wasn't available, they were busy, production hell, whatever the story is. So on the one hand, 1996, Martin Lawrence became increasingly erratic and arrested after he brandished a pistol in the middle of an intersection on Ventura Boulevard in Los Angeles, screaming, "They're trying to kill me." And he was hospitalized. This is now the second hospitalization, with his public relations agent citing exhaustion and dehydration as the reasons for this episode. And if I remember correctly, when he finally gets his shit together and does his stand-up, he talked about that, and that's the one where he was like, I was high as fuck. 1997, he gets sued by Tisha Campbell Martin for sexual harassment. Again, 97, Lawrence was arrested for punching a man in a Hollywood nightclub.
You know, this was also the golden age of celebrities using dehydration as an excuse for insane behavior.
I feel like that's something we need to come back to. I feel like, and I really, this is not an excuse to go into a political side rant. Please just let me have my joke. I feel like if the president gets impeached, he should cite exhaustion.
Look, I know that I masturbated on that dog, and I ran over two or three nuns about 5 minutes prior. But you have to understand, I was sleepy and I needed some Wawa.
During August of 1999, Lawrence slipped into a 3-day coma, collapsing him from exhaustion while jogging in 100-degree heat in preparation for Big Mama's house while wearing heavy clothing and a plastic suit. Okay, so he was prepping to be wearing the fat suit on set for hours at a time. Okay, so I just read you his hits from 96 through 99. And you might be thinking, well, he couldn't have possibly... No! Here's what he accomplished. Between 96, the year after Bad Boys, and 2000, okay? As I said earlier, a thin line between love and hate, which apparently he also directed. Nothing to Lose, Life, which was nominated for a Blockbuster Entertainment Award with Eddie Murphy and an NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Motion Picture. And he was in Blue Streak. Oh, yeah, and in 2000, so he must have shot in 1999, Big Mama's House, which was nominated for all kinds of awards, and he was also an executive producer. Martin Lawrence is just a treasure.
He's one of those guys where sometimes I wonder what would have been if he would have kept his head on straight, and then I look at some of the stuff he made during that time that was actually really fucking good, like Life especially, and then I just go, nah.
I remember post 2000, like the movies that came out, and I started, and this is where, as kind of a loose fan of his stand-up and his show and some of his movies, I was like, he's on the downswing here. Because we got What's the Worst That Could Happen, which he was an executive producer on, and Black Knight, which 2001, this is 20 years ago, and I'm thinking to myself at the time, I remember like, he's done as a career. He's done as an actor. There's no way he can recover from this. The next thing he does is the stand-up film that I keep referencing, which is Run Tell Dad.
Run Tell Dad. Yep.
Yeah, which I loved. I went to the theater to see that. I thought it was hilarious. And then shortly thereafter, he does National Security and Bad Boys 2. So, and he keeps on going.
Hang on. I'm looking up what year it was when he got banned from Saturday Night Live. Let's see.
We must protect Martin Lawrence. He's our nation's greatest treasure.
Let's see. Oh, I'm looking for the damn date and I can't find it. Okay, wrong article. Maybe the next one. Who has been banned from SNL? The story is behind. Damn it. Google did that stupid thing that like auto scrolls. Okay, here we have a Reddit thing. Okay, Reddit. Reddit will not lie to me. 94. Okay, so he got banned actually right before Bad Boys.
Yes, sir.
Huh. He really is brilliantly funny, but he also falls right in to that same sort of stereotype of the vulgar, raunchy, kind of edgy stand-up comic.
Yeah, he wasn't doing he wasn't doing a tremendous amount of like insightful comedy.
Well, no, but I was gonna say he falls into that kind of trope of the foul-mouthed, obscene comic who then all of a sudden makes the weird career turn and starts doing wacky, fairly safe comedies and family movies.
Yeah. All right. If there's nothing else in the notes here on Bad Boys 2, so this Lord of the Rings-esque nearly 3-hour goddamn epic is about our A plot is ecstasy is being shipped into Miami, and our titular heroes want to stop the ecstasy from being brought into Miami. Mm. Our B plot. These are not complicated movies. Our B plot is after 8 years of Mike wanting to kill everyone they come across, every motherfucker in this goddamn. No, sorry, that's Snakes on a Plane. Yeah, after 8 years of Mike's homicidal rantings masquerading as police work, Marcus has just about had enough. He's had enough of Mike and all of his shenanigans, and it comes to a head when, in the midst of trying to bust a huge shipment, not only does it turn out to be small potatoes as this group of Klan members was just buying a little bit of ecstasy. They weren't, this wasn't a major shipping situation. But also, in the midst of all the gunplay, Marcus Dunn got shot in the tushy.
Okay, I'm going to interject for just 1 second.
Sure.
Because if you had taken the description of that scene entirely out of context and not told me it was from a movie or where it originated, I would have probably chuckled and said, yeah, Family Guy's great sometimes.
So after being shot in the ass, Marcus has had enough and he is contemplating retirement. Which, oh, by the way, is also the plot of fucking Bad Boys for Life. Which a lot of what I said on Damn You Hollywood, I now kind of regret because what I should have said was, oh, wait a minute, they just softly rebooted Bad Boys by doing the exact same fucking B plot.
Too old for this shit!
Yes, he was too old for this shit in 2003. Now he's so old for this shit, no one gives a crap. Anyway, so there's a lot. So it's 8 years of just mounting tension. It's 8 years. They have this kind of friendship where, and I think people should be able to identify this because God knows I've known people like this. You have that one friend who just sucks up all the energy in the room. You know, he's the kind of friend that kind of makes fun of you to your wife or girlfriend, or he's always got to be the all eyes on him. And when you confront him on it, he's like, "What? I'm just being me." And you're like, "No, you're a giant douchebag."
Oh, fuck it. Oh, fuck it, friend. Nothing. You just described my ex.
Moving on.
I said what I fucking said.
You said what you fucking said, and God bless you for it. Moving on. So, and then by the same token, you have, the reverse of that is if you have this many problems with me as a friend. Why are you my friend? And there's that kind of tension. There's also, if you are able to read into a Michael Bay movie at all, and it gets tough at times, there is this kind of codependency that I think, at the very least, Michael has. I think he needs, whether he chooses to admit it or not, he needs Marcus there to kind of level him out, humanize him, stop him from going over the edge. And I think, like, he's the guy leaning back on his friend yelling, "Hold me back." It's subtext. It's rough. People are like, subtext to the Michael Bay movie. What have you been drinking? It's there. I swear it is. So there's that. The third plot to this Lord of the Rings-esque epic is Marcus has a sister who works for the DEA, and she's supposed to be a pencil pusher, but really she's an undercover agent. And oh, by the way, women are such frail things that even those who get into law enforcement and have active field service are just dainty little flowers who need a big strong man to protect them, like an older brother. So, Marcus does not approve of this grown-ass woman, played by Gabrielle Union, doing cop stuff. And so they insert themselves into her investigation into this ecstasy ring, and all kinds of mayhem ensues. Eventually, she ends up getting kidnapped by our villain and taken to Cuba after long, drawn-out, prolonged, protracted, ridiculous, several ridiculous car chases and gunfights happen. So we finally get to the third act of this thing, and I'm telling you, and I know I've said this already in another way, but Frodo got to Mordor in less time than it takes to get to the third act of this movie. So we finally get to Cuba, and our local narcotics police detectives are leading an army of SWAT team members to mount a land invasion of Cuba in order to rescue this woman from the clutches of our Cuban drug lord. And as they proceed to cause an international incident in Cuba by said land invasion,
it's funny. I could swear this has been tried before.
Get your missiles out of Cuba, for fuck's sake. And this is the high point of the movie for me, and really it's saving grace. There's a high-speed downhill chase between a Jeep and a Humvee, as there's nowhere to go, so they just go through what appear to be a closely knitted... Have you ever seen pictures of South America? Well, this is essentially it. It's just knitted together, closely positioned out, ramshackle houses and whatnot. And again, I don't know. Some of them might have belonged to drug lords and were cookhouses. Some of them might have been someone's shed where they had their lawnmower. And some of them were people's actual homes that they lived in. But Mike don't give a fuck. And is driving at top speed downhill in a Humvee through these people's living rooms. All that scene needed was a guy watching soccer as the car drove right past him. And so now they're driving downhill, and at top speed, they go straight for the U.S. base that's on. They go straight for Guantanamo Bay, and they drive through the wall, and are not immediately filled with lead from machine guns from everywhere, somehow. And Marcus, who has been wrestling with his own humanity and what it means to be a police officer through this whole movie and is tired of all the violence, shoots the Cuban in the head, saving Michael and his sister. But not before setting off at least 2 landmines.
That poor iguana.
And then we go back at the end. There was a gag earlier in the movie where they had just bought this above-ground pool, and the dog somehow got loose and was able to pull a piece of the pool down, and so the whole thing empties out into the sea behind them. Well, the dog does it again, and they sing Bad Boys as they float off into the sunset. Bad
You
Boys
know,
2.
a truly dim-witted motherfucker would have learned to not tie the horse dog up to the pool again.
Yeah, at the very least. Look, there's a lot about Bad Boys 2 that is not great. Okay, here's my take on Bad Boys 2, sort of my editorial comment here, and I'll let you go to town on this thing. Bad Boys 2 is what happens when your first movie is so successful, nobody bothers to say no. You're just allowed to unzip your pants and unravel your penis all over everything. It's just out there. And no one's like, Michael Bay, please put your dick back in your pants. This is wholly unnecessary and very unprofessional. And he was like, no. $140 million the first time I did this. No one stopped me then. No. You had pants on then. We swears it. That's what happens. That's what's happening in this movie. No one is stopping him. No one is saying, you don't need 3 hours to tell this fucking story. Stop it. You don't need action scenes that rival Jon Moxley versus Kenny Omega in a death match.
But of course, nobody says no to Schlongageddon.
Yes, no. Schlongageddon. Yeah, this was people just collaboratively looking at the success of the last one and going, okay, but what if we did the same thing again 3 times as long with beer? And everyone's like, yeah, good. Everything is just like, where the first one was very, very tight and focused and had a vision, this was very much just blown up. I'm trying to think of another movie where you have a similar thing going on, where everyone just sort of lost control of it and it got too big and too stupid, and all the charm just bled out of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know you're thinking of one now.
I'm trying. There are just so many action movies running through my head at this point. God, I should be able to come up with one. God knows we've talked about it up on this show. Didn't the Lethal Weapon movies kind of get there at one point?
Yeah, I would say the second half of the first two are fine. Then by I think we're talking about 3 and 4, you've lost the charm. I'm trying to think if we got there with Beverly Hills Cop 3. If by the third one they had lost sight of what made the first two so entertaining.
I mean, what I actually kind of come up with is, I don't go back to action movies, but I think of both Austin Powers sequels.
Okay, those are good examples.
Yeah, because the first one was a hilarious, super quotable send-up of spy movies, of Bond movies in particular.
Yeah.
The second one, yeah, started recycling some jokes. There were definitely some common beats there, but there was still enough newness that was injected to it that it didn't feel entirely stale yet. By the time you got to the third one, okay, we're having some fun with the drinking game here tonight, kids. The third one was kind of like that Shawn Michaels Ric Flair match from WrestleMania 24, except with none of the emotional investment. because the one thing about that match is, if you watch it carefully and you're enough of a scholar of Flair's career, you recognize that they're just playing his greatest hits, not just of the spots he worked into every match he had, but spots from some of his most famous matches. Like, you could watch stuff and you could pick out and go, oh, Ricky Steamboat. Ah, Sting. Ah, methinks I detect a little bit of Barry Windham in that one. Except in this case, it was a lot of the same tone, a lot of the same a lot of the same cliches, but the problem is this movie really serves to illustrate that it was the chemistry between Martin and Will and the freshness and allowing them to improvise as much as they did.
Mm-hmm. And that's
that made the first one feel so new.
And that's the thing, like, with this one, like, the bitching and complaining in the first one is funny because they're clearly having fun with each other. You know,
yeah.
they're two dudes jostling one another, and that's fun. This one, Martin Lawrence seems like he hates Will Smith in this movie. Yeah, it comes across like they're not friends. Like he's stuck with this guy in some sort of Faustian bargain. You know, it's like, well, your cross to bear is that you have to deal with this guy for the rest of your life, and he's ruining your life. Like all Martin Lawrence wants to do is get away from him, and circumstances of the plot, you know, of the movie keep bringing him back together. But all he wants to, I don't think he would have cried in Bad Boys 2 if Will Smith had just blown up during the initial Nazi scene. Like if he had died, they'd be like, "Oh, I'm so sad. I'm still alive. Oh, it's such a horrible thing. Mike Lowry died." And that's not fun. Like, I watched this the other night, and I'm like, wow, this is just... You're talking about wrestling references. The one I wanted to call out was the first time you see Shawn Michaels and Razor do the ladder match, where there was a purpose behind it, and everything fit. It's a damn tight match. They do it again at SummerSlam, and it just feels like more of the same but bigger and loses its charm.
See, now the thing about that, the only way that I would differ there is they made that one different by necessity. They had to, because the funny story about that match is somebody from the office came to them the night before the show, came to Shawn and Razor, and said, "We got a problem. New York Athletic Commission rules. You're not allowed to use the ladder as a weapon." Okay. It was. I don't know if it was. It wasn't New York because the first one was in Madison Square Garden. I forget where it was that SummerSlam was held. But whoever it was, the Athletic Commission dictated, no can do. You have to come up with an entirely different match. Athletic Commission says can't use the ladder as a weapon, so you got to find out a way to do this without, any of the same types of spots you used in your first one. And they came up with one. They came up with a match that, while it might not have had quite the high impact of the one at WrestleMania 10, it still felt fresh. It felt different. I'll say rarely. It rarely ever felt like we were just watching a stale retread. We were watching two guys who were actually trying to take something and freshen it up and liven it up a little bit.
Well, that's certainly not this movie.
Well, yeah, exactly. Bad Boys 2 is just taking most of the same tropes, bigger action, more action sequences, but it's devoid of the friendly ribbing rivalry between Martin and Will and all the charisma that came with that. Once you get past the electronic store scene, that's like the last time you see a genuinely warm moment between these two.
I also think trading out Téa Leoni for Gabrielle Union, and look, this isn't an issue with the actresses. Téa Leoni works in the first one because she's not a badass. She's trying her level best to keep her head above water, and she's not willing to just be a damsel in distress. And so that's charming. That's interesting. You have this woman who is a photographer and kind of a ne'er-do-well, and and she finds herself in these circumstances, and she's like rising to the challenge. That's what heroes do. That made her interesting. Gabrielle Union starts off as a cop and ends as a cop, and why am I supposed to feel any kind of tension for her demise? And you chose a dangerous profession, chose to do a dangerous undercover job, and oh well, you got caught. Mm-hmm. And I don't find her Gabrielle Union, I think, is a fine actress, and she's certainly a lovely looking lady.
Oh yeah. If you want a reason to hate Dwayne Wade, go scope out a young Gabrielle. Go scope out a young Gabrielle Union.
But she doesn't do. She's not given a good character, and she doesn't elevate the part at all. So there's a lot of things that don't work with this movie, and I've joked about it being spectacular, but honestly, this is me making fart face for 90% of the movie, and then watching that downhill chase and laughing so hard that I don't remember I hated the prior 2 hours.
Yeah, that downhill chase and everything that comes after it is the absolute best part of the movie. It's like, well, it's bookended. It's like bookended by that and and the KKK sequence.
Yeah, the KKK sequence is fun. Henry Rollins was, I think, not doing the Rollins band at that point. He had been trying to get as many acting gigs as he could. So, as a punk rock fan, it was fun to see Henry Rollins in the beginning of the thing. I don't know if you know who he is, but okay. He's leading the troops at the beginning. It's a fun action sequence. I like the idea that where they are, their radios aren't working, and so they're having to vamp, and the whole thing is just coming unglued. That whole thing is fun. But then from that point on until the whole attack on the compound, the whole thing is fun if you're just into watching a paramilitary action sequence.
And if you want to throw in an old woman getting cold cocked by a gun butt.
Oh, that's awesome. I fucking cheered when I saw that. I was half tired. So yeah, just in summation, and I'll give you the last word. Their chemistry it's there, but it's not as strong. This feels more stilted and less improv, which took away its charm. The action sequences, they're too many and they're too long, except for the one I've already mentioned. Gabrielle Union does nothing with the part she's given, and the part she's given is not a great part. And so overall, I think this was a project that got away from everybody involved. I think there was good intentions here, and I think the idea of, well, we were doing a sequel, we have to top the last one. The art of the sequel and really the art of building a franchise, and something I think Marvel does pretty well, is knowing how to top yourself without going overboard. I think for every successful venture, there needs to be the guy in the room who wasn't a part of the last one, who has final right to say no. Someone reminding everybody that they are in fact human and capable of making egregious errors. And I think that person was missing from this project.
My last word on this is that the best way to improve this might have been to have not made Bad Boys 2 as a movie. Because if you rework a couple of things and maybe alter the pacing a bit, what you actually would be 5 pretty decent 30-minute episodes of a Netflix series, as opposed to a slog of a story that you absolutely seemingly feel obligated to sit through for 2.5 hours at a time. And my God, do you feel every single second of it by the time you're about midway through. I misread the timestamp at first. I was horrified. At one point, I went to check how much time was left. I was like, oh, okay, it's about a 90-minute movie. Then I looked at it and I realized, wait a sec. Oh no. Oh God, no. No. There's 90 fucking minutes left? What are you going to have them do?
So here's what I'll tell you. In 2003, there's no Netflix streaming service to be had. And I understand the point you're making. You're not necessarily wrong. I think you could work the story here into a full season of television. But you don't have that option in 2001, 2002 when this thing is in pre-production. So I will see your Netflix TV series and raise you, cut this movie in half, and release it as 2 pictures.
Yeah.
End it where
not a bad idea.
End it where she gets kidnapped.
Yeah, that was a thing we were definitely doing at that point. We were definitely doing the whole make both the sequels at once. Derp. Man did that trend end quickly.
I think you I think if you cut this in half and then on that second half you build some more stuff into the story so that it isn't just essentially you release the last 90 minute, you release the third act as a whole movie. I think you have a solid trilogy here. I think one of the things you can do is then go back and watch the first one again if you're on the creative team of this movie and kind of think like, well, what really made this what made the first one so popular, and stop getting so focused on, well, we did so good the first time that anything we do the second time will be successful too. Like, go back to the first one and then work those and then rework this 3-hour movie into 2 90-minute to 2-hour movies. Mm-hmm. And then I think you have a nice well-told trilogy. Because at the end of the day, if you look at what the first one was about and the nature of their relationship and kind of take it full circle, I think you can tell a nice story. This doesn't really tell a nice story. This is more of a thing happened in the first movie, and then a whole other thing happens in the second movie, and nothing is really resolved, and they're no better off than they were at the way beginning of this thing. Like, when they're floating off into the sunset, I don't feel like their relationship has grown in any way, shape, or form. They're arguing till the credits roll, except for when they're singing "Bad Boys."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at the end of all of this, of course, it bears noting that Mike and Marcus's sister decide to just break up anyway.
Yeah, and they break up because they think Marcus is an asshole.
So it was all of that, all of that work to get there to the end for nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
That is the most baffling part. You just made the entire B plot of your movie meaningless.
I will tell you that I'm sure they thought they were going to do a third one, and so they couldn't. They thought that the math doesn't work if Mike is attached to anyone. So they were like, "Fuck it, we'll break him up at the end of the movie, and that way Mike is still single and can bang lots of bitches in the third one." And then they were shocked, I tell you, when this thing barely makes double its budget.
Oh, Jesus. So it did that badly, huh?
It was a $130 million budget, so it needed to make north of $260 million. It makes $273.
Christ with a cookie cake. $19 million budget for the first one.
Yeah.
9 figures for the second sequel.
I mean, it reminds me of the Patton Oswalt joke about he equated being a film director to a guy ejaculating, and he's just shooting all this film everywhere. Shooting endless streams of film. And then the woman who is the editor has to come along and be like, okay, I've got to take all this film you shot and turn it into a movie somehow. Patton Oswalt, everybody. AP Bio sucked, but he's damn funny.
Right. Yeah, AP Bio was a Community knockoff. I found it kind of amusing, but
2 episodes, and I was like, I can't ever watch this again. This is terrible. In my opinion. If you like it, hang on. That cartoon strip that the certain individuals have been showing me because of my rants on Star Wars lately. If you found joy in AP Bio, I'm happy for you. There, check. All right, are we done? Are we wrapped? Bad boys. What you gonna do?
What I'm gonna do is probably go play instead of an action movie game. Probably gonna play some Rainbow Six Siege.
Terrific.
Play a nice, calm, tactical shooter.
All right. As for when Sean and I are getting back together again, we're going to break for a week, and then we'll be back on February 6th for the 1998 Lost in Space. And that is it for the month of February. So you'll get one on trial in the month of February, Lost in Space, 1998, February 6th. In March, I'm not going to read the whole year here, but in March, we'll get together again. We'll do an on trial the week of St. Patrick's Day. Not on St. Patrick's Day because they fucking moved Bloodshot around, so I had to rearrange the calendar. But what's important here is that we will be doing, and Sean picked this one, we will be doing an on trial for the Boondock Saints on March 19th. Again, the week we're celebrating St. Patrick's Day 2 days late and in style. So that'll be a fun one, the Boondock Saints. And in April, we've got two. And we've got A Long Road to Ruin. We're going to look at the Timothy Dalton James Bond movies on April 16th. And then we're going to do an on-trial for The Golden Compass because we'll be examining the various iterations of his Dark Materials, the HBO series, the comic book. So Sean and I will do a on-trial for The Golden Compass on April 30th. What do you think about all that?
I think it all sounds good, and it's a great excuse for me to finally watch The Golden Compass.
Yeah, me too, considering I didn't know what it was until my dad was like, it's his Dark Materials as a movie. Like, oh, shit. All right, then. All right, what do you got going on, sir?
Well, my streams are currently a little bit spotty because I'm trying to work out some technical glitches with my new setup. But, hey, tell you what, if you really want to follow when I'm going to be back to playing, in particular, a lot of Mortal Kombat, Rainbow Six Siege, and, of course, a whole fucking lot of Overwatch over at twitch.tv/Comer Codex, and on the weekends, twitch.tv/Hunters of Artemis. You can follow me on Twitter at Comer Codex because I virtually always post updates at least about an hour before I go live, if not a little bit more.
Okay. Depending on where you found this show, we are currently on the W2M network exclusively now. The Radulich broadcast feed is no longer being updated. So all of our shows are exclusively now on WTM. If you haven't subscribed yet through your podcasting app or wherever it is you listen to podcasts, please go ahead and do so. And if you're one of those people who listens to it on Apple Podcasts, take a few extra seconds and throw a star rating. I don't beg for nothing, but if you want to give us 5 stars because you believe in us and you think we're that good, we would certainly appreciate it. And if you want to give us a 1 star, I wouldn't blame you. Either way, please throw a star rating up there, and if you really, really have the time and the inclination, throw a quick review on there. It takes literally seconds to do, so if you're doing it from your phone, and it helps us out, and we would really appreciate it. For all of the things that I've said over the years about this sort of thing, the truth of it is we would love it if you gave us a rating and or a review. That would really help us out. So we're trying to get the word out. Every time we move the feed, we lose people. They're like, where'd you go? Well, I'm trying my level best here to bring you all with me. So do your part. Leave a review. Leave a star rating. Make sure you subscribe. Tell a friend. Do like I do. Just grab people's phones and subscribe for them. Go into your relative's house, get on their computer and say, hey, how do you listen to podcasts? And just start downloading them. Also a true story. I'll take inflated numbers. I don't care. All right. Thank you, Sean, for hanging out with me tonight, talking Bad Boys. Bad Boys, what you going to do?
Thank you as always for having me.
Absolutely. We'll talk again in 2 weeks. Until then, be well, be safe, and behave.